I woke up in a dead military aircraft above a sea of lava. The system said, Air Arc Operator activated. Arc Viability Index, 4 out of 100. Air supply, 6 hours. Maneuvering fuel, 90 minutes. I didn't know how I got here. But the system already knew me. The cockpit smelled like burned insulation and old metal. One seat, mine, was intact. The other was soaked in dried blood. Whoever sat there last didn't make it. The instrument panel was half dead, 3 screens black, 1 flickering with static, 2 actually working. Outside the cracked viewport, red sky, ash clouds, and somewhere far below, slow orange rivers of lava cutting through what used to be a continent. I sat still for about 4 seconds. Then I started moving. The AI core was the first thing that talked to me. Not a voice exactly, more like text appearing at the edge of my vision, projected by some kind of heads-up interface I hadn't asked for. Arc Core, welcome, operator. This aircraft is designated Air Arc Unit 7. Current status, critical. Recommend prioritizing life support before any other action. Me, can this thing fly? Arc Core, engines are locked. Flight systems require minimum AVI of 15. Current AVI, 4, recommend not dying before filters are operational. I stared at the text for a moment. That's genuinely unhelpful. Arc Core, noted. Air contamination rising. Recommend action. I got up and walked the aircraft from cockpit to tail. This was the first real inventory, not numbers on a screen, but my own eyes on the actual machine. Technical corridor, narrow, low ceiling, smell of burned wiring. Emergency lighting, only pale red strips along the floor. 3 storage panels on the left wall, 2 sealed, 1 hanging open and empty. The MX-4 service drone sat in its charging cradle at the far end, status light blinking green. Alive. Good. Pressurized zone, for bunk frames bolted to the walls, no mattresses. 2 emergency oxygen canisters in a wall rack, each labeled 20 minutes. And 3 cracks in the pressure seams. One of them was audibly hissing. I put my hand near it. Cool air pulling outward. Not good. Arc Core, 3 pressure seal failures detected. Seal breach rate adjusted. Remaining breathable air, 4 hours, not 6. Recommend immediate action. 4 hours. Not 6. I stood there for exactly 1 second processing that. Then I walked back to the charging cradle and activated the drone. The MX-4 powered up with a low hum and floated up to eye level. Small, about the size of a large dog, flat and angular, with 4 rotors and a sensor cluster at the front that swiveled toward me like it was looking. Find me anything I can use to seal pressure joints. Metal strips, adhesive panels, compression foam, anything. It beeped once and moved. I went to the open storage panel and started going through what was there: 2 coils of wire, a hand tool kit, a thermal patch kit designed for hull repairs, limited application on interior seams, but possible, and 1 small roll of high compression bonding tape rated for vacuum environments. I did the math. 3 cracks. Tape covers 1, maybe 1.5 if I'm careful. Thermal patches, 2 more if the surfaces are clean enough to bond. It works. Barely. The drone came back in 4 minutes with a rectangular metal strip it had pulled from somewhere in the dead navigation module up front. Smart, I said. It beeped. Here's the problem with working in bad air: you don't notice it happening. The CO2 builds slowly. You think you're fine. You're focused. You're moving fast. And then somewhere around the 20-minute mark you reach for a tool and your hand goes to the wrong place, and you look at it like it belongs to someone else. I had 1 emergency oxygen canister. 20 minutes of clean air. The choice was simple and terrible: use it, breathe properly, and lose both hands to working with an awkward mask on. Or don't use it, keep both hands free, and start making mistakes. I didn't use it. I worked on the largest crack first, running along the lower left seam of the pressurized zone where the floor panel met the hull. The bonding tape went on in overlapping strips, pressed hard, sealed with the edge of the tool handle. The hissing dropped to silence. Crack 2, thermal patch on the upper right corner where 2 wall panels met. Surface wasn't clean. I wiped it with my sleeve, pressed the patch anyway. It held. Barely. Crack 3, the drone held the metal strip flat against a diagonal fracture near the ceiling while I ran the remaining tape over it and pressed. My hands were slower now. I noticed. I pressed harder to compensate. Arc core, CO2 concentration, 1.6%. Cognitive performance reduction estimated at 18%. Recommend, I know. Arc core, finishing faster. The strip held. The hissing stopped. I sat down on the floor of the pressurized zone and breathed for a moment. The air still tasted like metal and old smoke. But it wasn't actively leaving anymore. I ran the numbers out loud. It helped. Air stable now, 8 hours if the patches hold. Emergency canisters, 40 minutes total backup. Power 11 hours on emergency battery. Drone operational. Tools present. Thermal patches used. Bonding tape gone. Arc core, OVI update, 4.9. Pressurization stability, acceptable. Diagnostic interface unlocked. A new display opened in my vision, a full schematic of the aircraft, every system mapped and color-coded. Red meant dead. Yellow meant damaged. Green meant operational. I counted the green ones. 3 out of 22. Air filtration, green. Emergency lighting, green. Drone charging cradle, green. Everything else, red or yellow. Arc core, recommend next priority, power systems. Emergency battery estimated depletion, 11 hours. Without stable power, filtration shuts down. I looked at the schematic. Deep in the rear section, past the sealed tail door marked access restricted AVI 20+, there was a system labeled, compact military power unit, status, damaged. Restart probability, 41%. 41%. Better than 0. How do I get to it? Arc core, technical corridor, aft section. Note, tail compartment remains sealed until AVI threshold is reached. Power unit is accessible via maintenance panel C7 in the starboard wall. And if the restart fails? Arc core, 11 hours becomes 0 hours. Outside, through the small porthole above the bunk frames, the lava was still moving. Slow and permanent and completely indifferent. I got up. 11 hours wasn't a deadline. It was a countdown, and it had already started. Panel C7 was behind a wall of bundled cables and a fire suppression unit that had already discharged empty canister, dried chemical residue on the floor. The drone got there first, cleared enough space for me to reach the panel, and held its light steady while I worked the bolts. The panel came off. Inside, the compact military power unit. About the size of a large chest freezer, matte gray, with 3 status indicators on the face. 2 were dark. One was blinking amber, slow, irregular, like a pulse that wasn't sure it wanted to keep going. It's alive, I said. Arc core, partially. Primary cells, depleted. Secondary cells, 34% charge. Tertiary ignition circuit, intact. Manual restart sequence available via control interface. Warning, unit operating temperature will exceed safe threshold approximately 40 minutes post-ignition. Cooling system required. We don't have a cooling system. Arc core, correct. Recommend building one before ignition. I looked at the unit. Then at the drone. Then at the schematic in my vision. What's the restart probability without cooling on standby? Arc core, ignition, 41%. Sustained operation past 40 minutes, 8%. 8%. That wasn't a plan. That was a lottery. The drone and I went through every accessible section of the aircraft looking for anything that could function as a heat exchanger. This took 34 minutes. I was aware of every one of them. 11 hours on the battery clock, minus 34 minutes, minus however long the build would take. Here's what we found: 2 aluminium panel sections from the navigation module up front, dead system, no loss pulling them. Each about 60 by 40 centimeters, good thermal conductivity. 1 length of copper core cable from the electrical bypass behind bunk frame 3, strippable, useful for contact points. 2 compression clamps from the toolkit. And a section of ventilation tubing, flexible, intact, running from a non-functional climate control unit near the cockpit. I laid it all out on the floor of the technical corridor. The drone hovered and watched. You understand what I'm trying to build? It beeped once. Then help me. The logic was simple. The execution was not. A heat exchanger works by moving heat away from a hot component into a material or medium that carries it elsewhere. The power unit needed its heat pulled out before it could accumulate to dangerous levels. The aluminum panels would conduct. The tubing would route. The cable contacts would help distribute. The problem: I was building this out of stripped parts in a dead aircraft with hand tools, in air that still tasted like smoke, while a battery clock counted down. I worked from the power unit outward. The drone held the first aluminum panel flat against the unit's primary exhaust surface while I clamped it. Contact wasn't perfect, the surfaces didn't make cleanly, but it was close enough for conduction. Second panel went on the opposite side, same method. Then the tubing. Routed from the panels upward through the maintenance channel to a section of hull where the outside temperature differential would pull heat passively. Not efficient. But functional. I tightened the last clamp. ARCOR, improvised thermal exchange assembly detected. Estimated cooling efficiency, 22% of rated requirement. Insufficient for sustained high-load operation. Sufficient for controlled low-load operation. Define controlled low-load. ARCOR, power output limited to 60% capacity. Overheat threshold extended from 40 minutes to approximately 3.5 hours under continuous use. 3.5 hours. Enough to work with. Good enough. Start the ignition sequence. The power unit took 90 seconds to restart. First, a low vibration through the floor panels. Then a rising hum that I felt more in my chest than heard. The two dark status indicators came on, one green, one amber. The blinking amber steadied. Then the lights changed. Emergency red strips went white. 3 ceiling panels powered up. The ventilation system clicked on with a rush of air that smelled clean by comparison to what I'd been breathing. The diagnostic schematic in my vision updated, several systems shifting from dark red to amber. For about 6 seconds, everything felt like it was going to be fine. Then the temperature indicator on the power unit started climbing. ARCOR, unit temperature, nominal. Nominal +4. Nominal +9. Rate of increase, 0.8 degrees per minute. I watched it. ARCOR, at current rate, overheat threshold reached in 31 minutes. Thermal assembly underperforming projected estimate. You said 3.5 hours. ARCOR, projection assumed optimal panel contact. Actual contact surface, approximately 67% of optimal. Efficiency adjusted. 31 minutes. The drone looked at me. Or did whatever a drone does that feels like looking. Okay, I said. New problem. The filter system ran on 40 units of power. The cooling circuit for the power unit itself needed 20. Lighting indoors took 15. That left 25 in reserve I'd planned to leave untouched because something was always about to break. The thermal assembly was underperforming because the panel contact wasn't tight enough. I couldn't reclamp mid-operation without cutting power, which reset the whole sequence. But I could redirect some of that reserve power to run the ventilation system at higher throughput, move more air across the panels, increase passive cooling by convection. Cost, 18 units from reserve. Reserve drops to 7. 7 units of reserve in a system with 22 components in red or amber. I ran the numbers out loud, 100 units total output. 40 filtration. 20 unit cooling. 15 lighting indoors. 18 to boost ventilation. That's 93. 7 left. 7 units standing between us and whatever breaks next. ARCOR, mathematically accurate. Recommend executing ventilation boost immediately. Temperature threshold, 18 minutes remaining. I executed it. The ventilation fans spun up. Air started moving faster through the technical corridor, across the aluminum panels, up through the hull routing. The temperature indicator slowed. Nominal +9. +10. +10. Still at +10. I watched it for 2 minutes. It held. Arc core, temperature stabilized. Overheat threshold extended. Estimated stable operation window, 4 hours, 20 minutes. But the air got worse before it got better. Boosting ventilation meant pulling more throughput through the filtration system than it was rated for at this condition level. For 18 minutes while the temperature crisis was live, I'd had to drop the lower filtration circuit to half capacity to redirect that power to cooling. The CO2 climbed. Arc core, CO2 concentration, 1.4%. Increasing. I was on my back under the power unit checking a cable contact when my hand went to the wrong bolt a second time. I noticed immediately now I'd learned to notice. I stopped, breathed slowly, found the right bolt, and finished the check. Arc core, CO2, 1.8%. Cognitive performance reduction estimated at 22%. How long until I can bring the lower filter back online? Arc core, temperature must stabilize below threshold for 6 minutes before power can be safely redistributed. Current stable window, 3 minutes elapsed. 3 more minutes. I sat on the floor of the technical corridor, back against the wall, and did nothing except breathe as slowly as I could manage. The drone sat next to me on the floor. It had stopped hovering, conserving its own battery, I realized. Smart. You're more useful than you look, I told it. It beeped once. At the 6-minute mark, I brought the lower filtration circuit back to full. The CO2 started dropping. 20 minutes later, the air was clean enough that I stopped noticing it. That's when you know it's actually clean, when you stop thinking about it. I sat down in the cockpit for the first time since waking up and looked at the full system schematic properly. The power unit, running. Stable. 4 hours before I needed to check the thermal assembly again. I thought about what was left. Fuel, 90 minutes of maneuvering capacity. The aircraft wasn't going anywhere meaningful. But it also wasn't going to fall, it was holding position on some kind of structural remnant below, a ridge of cooled rock that hadn't collapsed yet. The tail compartment, still sealed. AVI required, 20. Current AVI, unknown until I ran the update. Arc core, AVI update processing. I waited. Arc core, AVI, 918. Power systems, operational. Filtration, operational. Thermal management, provisional. New system access unlocked, full diagnostic display, secondary communication array damaged, partial function. 18, 2 points from the tail compartment threshold. I looked at the secondary communication array in the schematic. Damaged. But partial function meant it could receive even if it couldn't transmit cleanly. I flagged it for later. Then the drone sensor cluster turned sharply toward the starboard porthole. I looked. Nothing visible, just ash-gray sky and a distant column of smoke rising from something burning on the surface below. But the drone held its orientation for a full 10 seconds before turning back to me. Arc core, thermal sensor in MX-4 drone detected mobile heat signature. Bearing, 047 degrees. Distance, approximately 28 to 31 kilometers. Signature profile consistent with rotary wing aircraft. Someone was out there. Moving. Not random, directional. Holding a bearing. I stared at the porthole for a moment. Can they see us? Arc core, probability, moderate. This aircraft's power unit restart produced a thermal emission spike 22 minutes ago. Detectable at 40 plus kilometers by standard military-grade sensors. So we'd lit up. The moment I turned the power on, we announced ourselves to anyone looking. I kept watching the bearing. The signature held its course for another 4 minutes, then faded, moving away, or dropping below the terrain. Either way, gone for now. For now. I ran the full inventory out loud. The drone seemed to pay attention. Power, stable, 4-hour check cycle. Air, clean, lower filter back to full. Temperature, holding. Battery reserve, 7 units, don't touch. Fuel, 90 minutes, don't waste it. Avi, 18. Tail compartment, 2 points away. Someone outside knows we're here, or will. I looked at the schematic. The power unit was running. The air was breathable. The cooling was holding provisionally. And 28 kilometers away, something with rotor blades had been flying in a direction that wasn't random. Arcor, recommend next priority, fuel acquisition. Current maneuvering capacity insufficient for meaningful operations. Estimated useful range, 12 to 15 kilometers. 12 kilometers. Barely enough to matter. But the drone had just shown me something was out there at 28 to 31. I needed to reach it before it reached me, or at least before whoever was flying it decided this newly warm military aircraft was worth investigating. Part 3, First crew member plus fuel. The drone tracked the heat signature for 6 hours before it stopped moving. Stationary. Same bearing, 28 kilometers out. Whatever it was, it had landed or run out of reasons to keep flying. I watched the indicator on the schematic for another 40 minutes, waiting for it to move again. It didn't. Arcor, mobile signature has been stationary for 47 minutes. Probability of structural shelter at location, high. Probability of fuel storage at location, moderate. Recommend reconnaissance. With 90 minutes of fuel. Arcor, 28 kilometers at minimum thrust, approximately 19 minutes one way. Return, 19 minutes. Remaining buffer, 52 minutes. Viable. Viable. That word was doing a lot of work. I looked at the drone. You go first. Low altitude, passive sensors only, don't transmit anything. I want visuals. It beeped and was gone through the maintenance hatch I'd cracked open in the lower hull, a gap just wide enough for the MX-4's frame. I watched its feed on the secondary display, ash-gray terrain below, the surface cracked in black where it had cooled, orange-red where it hadn't. Columns of smoke in every direction. The sky above was the color of old bruises. At 26 kilometers the drone's camera picked up a structure. A hangar. Military pattern, pre-collapse construction, sitting on a plateau of cooled rock that jutted out from the surrounding lava field like a broken tooth. One wall had partially collapsed. The roof was intact over 2/3 of its span. And in the gap where the wall had come down, a vehicle. Rotary wing. Old civilian conversion with military modifications bolted on. Grounded. And standing next to it, looking at the drone with an expression that was not afraid, was a person. She didn't run. She didn't raise anything at the drone. She just looked at it for a long moment, then deliberately turned and walked back into the hangar. Like she was waiting to see what came next. I lifted the aircraft. The 28-kilometer run took 21 minutes at minimum thrust. I'd been optimistic about the headwind. That left 48 minutes of fuel when I touched down on the plateau, 60 meters from the hangar entrance. Not enough for mistakes. I kept the engines at idle and waited. She came out after 90 seconds. 50s, compact, moving like someone who'd spent decades in mechanical spaces, economical, nothing wasted. Work clothes in layers, all of them practical. She was carrying tools in her right hand. Not a weapon. But the way she held them made it clear the choice had been deliberate. She stopped 10 meters from the aircraft and looked at it the way a doctor looks at a patient they're not sure they want to take on. Then she said, loudly enough to carry, "What's your AVI?" I opened the cockpit window. 18. A pause. Something shifted in her expression, not quite surprise. More like recalibration. "You started from 4, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Alone? Yes. She looked at the aircraft for another few seconds. Then at me. I'm so Jia. I know military thermal systems, pressure architecture, and reactor-adjacent cooling. I know this airframe series. I know where everything is and what it should be doing and what it's actually doing. She said it without inflection. Pure information. I want a berth, sealed access to the technical compartment, and written log rights on all system modifications. Technical compartment access, yes, I said. But all changes go through the system log. Every one. That's reasonable. And I need to know everything you know. Not when it's convenient. Immediately. She looked at me for a moment. You found the power unit. Yes. Show me the thermal assembly. She was inside for 4 minutes. I heard nothing. Then she came back to the hatch and looked at me with an expression that wasn't quite contempt but was definitely in the neighborhood. You mounted the panels inverted. I said nothing. The primary exhaust surface runs left to right. You oriented the conduction panels front to back. You're shedding maybe 60% of what you think you're shedding. She held up a hand before I could respond. It's not catastrophic. The ventilation compensation is actually smart. But the assembly will degrade in 30 to 40 hours and you won't know what's happening until the unit spikes. I'd run the numbers 6 times. I'd felt confident about the numbers. How long to fix it? 2 hours. I need the drone. It's yours. She looked at the drone, which had followed her back from the inspection and was hovering at shoulder height. MX4, she said. Self-learning series. She looked at it for a moment. Don't get attached to it. The drone beeped. It sounded, somehow, offended. While So Jiao worked on the thermal assembly, I dealt with the fuel problem. Her hangar had 3 things of value: the rotary wing aircraft, hers, not negotiable, she made that clear immediately, a wall rack of basic mechanical components, and in a sealed rear storage bay, for drums of aviation-grade fuel mix. Military surplus, pre-collapse stock. Each drum, approximately 200 liters. 800 liters total. Arcor, arc fuel capacity, 3,400 liters for standard tanks. Current level, 190 liters, approximately 90 minutes maneuvering. 800 liters additional, total 990 liters. Estimated operational range at cruise, approximately 6 hours, 40 minutes. Not enough to go far. But enough to be mobile. Enough to stop being a fixed target on a rock shelf. The problem, the drums weighed 180 kilograms each. Full. I had myself and a drone. So Jiao was working on the assembly and I wasn't pulling her off that. I found a manual transfer pump in the hangar's maintenance bay, ran the hose from the first drum to the aircraft's fuel port, and started the transfer. It was slow. The pump was old, the seals were stiff, and the hose kept trying to kink at the second joint. It took 47 minutes to transfer 3 of the 4 drums. On the 4th drum, the pump seized. I looked at it. The drone looked at it. So Jia. She appeared at the hangar entrance, hands still carrying tools. Pump seized. Last drum. She looked at the pump for 2 seconds. Impeller. Give me the medium wrench. 4 minutes later the pump was running again. As she handed the wrench back she said, without looking at me, your heat exchanger will last another 60 hours now. After that, rebuild. I'll show you the correct orientation before then. Appreciated. It's not generosity. It's self-preservation. She paused. Same thing, out here. The fuel transfer completed as the sky shifted, the ash clouds thickening overhead, the lava light below going from orange to deep red. Visibility was dropping. I ran the numbers: fuel, 990 liters, approximately 6 hours, 40 minutes operational range. Power, stable, 3-hour check cycle remaining. Air, clean. Thermal assembly, corrected, 60-hour stable window. AVI, 18. Drone, operational. Crew, 2, better. Measurably better than 6 hours ago. And then the drone swung hard to the northwest. Arcor, MX4 tracking new thermal signature. Bearing, 312 degrees. Distance, 19 kilometers. Signature profile, rotary wing aircraft, larger than previous contact. Speed, 60 knots. Heading, direct approach. Direct approach. Not passing through. Not random. Coming here. So Jia. She was already looking northwest, though there was nothing visible yet through the ash. I know that signature, she said. Her voice was level. There's a scavenger group operating in this sector. 3-man crew. Armed. A pause. They've been watching this plateau for 2 weeks. I've been making myself look empty. She looked at the aircraft. Then at me. You lit up 7 hours ago when you restarted the power unit. They tracked it here. Of course they did. How long until they're overhead? Our core, at current speed and heading, 19 minutes. 19 minutes. We had 990 liters of fuel and a corrected heat exchanger and no weapons and 2 people. Can we lift? Yes, so Jia said. But if they see us lift from this location, they follow. They have better speed than this airframe at low altitude. Then they can't see us lift. She looked at me. The ash column, I said. Northwest of the plateau, 4 kilometers, the big one from the surface collapse. If we move into it before they get visual range, their thermals still work in ash. Not if I spike the external temperature profile. Heat the hull plating in zones, create a signature that reads like a ground fire, not an aircraft. So Jia was quiet for 3 seconds. That was, I was learning, a significant amount of time for her to spend not immediately objecting. It burns 12% more fuel. I know. And stresses the portside plating at the joint above the gear housing. I know. And your drone becomes the only working countermeasure if they get close. I know. Another pause. It might work, she said. And walked back inside to strap in. We lifted at the 14-minute mark, 5 minutes before the scavenger aircraft would reach visual range assuming standard ash layer visibility. I ran hull heating on zone C, D, and F, the aft lower sections, pushing them to 180 degrees external surface temperature. The aircraft's thermal profile from above would read as a hot ground feature, not a vehicle. It wasn't perfect. But it was something. The drone I sent northeast opposite direction at full speed, emitting a minimal thermal trace. Not enough to fool anyone watching carefully. Enough to create a second point of interest. Mind you, no, not yet. That name wasn't in my life yet. Just me and So Jia and the drone. We flew into the ash column at 200 meters altitude. Visibility dropped to near zero. The aircraft's instruments were the only reality. Our core, scavenger aircraft, 8 kilometers. 6 kilometers. Slowing. I held our position inside the column. The ash was loud against the hull, a constant dry hiss, like static. Our core, scavenger aircraft, stationary. 5.1 kilometers. Scanning pattern detected. They were looking. Hovering over where we'd been. I heard a voice through the partial function communication array, not clear enough to make out words, just tone. 3 voices. Something that sounded like an argument. Then the signature moved. Away. Northeast, following the drone's trace. Our core, scavenger aircraft changing heading, 078 degrees. Moving away from current position. Drone signal detected as primary interest. Recommend drone recovery within 12 minutes before battery depletion. I let out a breath I hadn't consciously been holding. So Jia, from the technical corridor, hull zone temperatures? Dropping. We're clear of the column in 3 minutes. Zone C joint, check it when we land. I told you about the stress. I know. Saying it again. I called the drone back. We cleared the ash column and held it 600 meters. Below, the lava fields, the broken surface of what used to be land, smoke columns in every direction. The plateau with So Jia's hangar was behind us. The scavengers were 11 kilometers northeast and still moving away. I ran the numbers: fuel, 870 liters, lost 120 to the hull heating and the column transit. Approximately 5 hours, 50 minutes range. Power, stable. Air, clean. AVI, 18. Hull, Zone C stress, inspect on next landing. Drone, returning, battery at 14%. Crew, 2, still viable. But 5 hours and 50 minutes of fuel was not a civilization. It was not even a base. It was a clock. Our core, Tail compartment access threshold, AVI 20. Current AVI, 18. Recommend actions to close gap. Note, tail compartment contains sealed emergency provisions and one item flagged as high priority by previous operator. What item? Arc core, designation only, water recovery module, atmospheric condensate type. No further data available without tail compartment access. Water. A dedicated water recovery system, the kind of thing that could turn atmospheric moisture into a sustainable supply. Not just survival. Infrastructure. 2 AVI points away. And I had 5 hours and 50 minutes of fuel, a thermal assembly that needed a recheck in 57 hours, a Zone C hull stress point. One functioning drone at 14% battery, one engineer who communicated mostly in corrections, and a scavenger group 11 kilometers out who would eventually realize the northeast trace was a decoy. I looked at the schematic. So Gia's correction had turned 22% cooling efficiency into something that would actually last. She'd found the pump impeller in 4 minutes. She knew where everything was in this airframe. She was also, right now, in the technical corridor writing something in a small notebook she'd brought from the hangar. What are you writing? A pause. The previous operator's maintenance log, she said. I found it in the NAV module housing. First day. I went very still. You found it the first day. Yes. And you're telling me now. I'm telling you now. A beat. There are things in it you'll want to know. And things you won't. I was deciding which order. The drone returned through the maintenance hatch and settled into its cradle. I looked at it. It looked back. 3 days ago this was a dead aircraft with 6 hours of air and no power. Now, stable air, working power, corrected cooling, 870 liters of fuel, and an engineer who knows things she hasn't told me yet. AVI, 18. 2 points from the tail compartment. 2 points from water. Next problem, I have an engineer with a dead operator's notebook in her pocket. And she chose when to mention it. The tail compartment opened at AVI 20. It took us 11 hours to get there. So Jia recalibrated the secondary filtration sensor, that was 1.2 points. I rerouted the emergency lighting circuit through the main power bus, eliminating the battery drain that had been running quietly in the background since before I woke up, that was 0.6. So Jia found a pressure microleak in the aft sleeping berth I'd missed on my first walkthrough, that was 0.3. Numbers. Everything was numbers now. Arc core, AVI, 20.1. Tail compartment access, unlocked. The door released with a pressurized exhale, good seal, intact storage. Inside, 8 sealed emergency provision crates, a medical kit in a wall-mounted case, 2 folded thermal survival blankets, and in the far corner, bolted to the floor with 4 heavy clamps, a flat gray unit about the size of a storage chest. With a label that had been partly burned and partly scraped off. What remained? Atmocon WR7 water recovery, atmospheric cond, the rest was gone. So Jia crouched next to it and ran her hands along the casing seams. Military issue. WR7 series. Pulls moisture from air at altitude, runs it through a 3-stage purification column, outputs drinkable water. She stood. Rated for 8 to 11 kilometers altitude. At lower altitude the yield drops significantly. How significantly? At 600 meters, maybe 12 liters per hour. We need 60 per day for 5 people. She looked at me. 5? We're going to need more crew. She said nothing for a moment. Then, at 9 kilometers altitude, yield is approximately 38 liters per hour. 2 hours per day at that altitude gives you 76 liters. Minus system losses, call it 68. 68 liters. Enough. What does the altitude run cost? Arc core, fuel consumption at 9 kilometers altitude versus cruise altitude, approximately 34% higher per hour. 2-hour run, equivalent to 68 liters of fuel. Daily cost. 68 liters of fuel per day to produce 68 liters of water. I ran that through twice to make sure I hadn't made an error. That's a direct trade, I said. Fuel for water. Yes, so Jia said. Every day. Then we need more fuel before we can run the water system sustainably. Yes. I looked at the unit. Then at the provision crates. I'd count those later. Then at the schematic. Install it. We run the first collection tonight to test the system. 1 hour, not 2, I want the yield data before I commit to the fuel cost daily. So Jia was already opening the clamps. The WR7 installation took Soja 4 hours and required the drone for 2 of them. Routing the output line through the existing plumbing architecture was a precise job in a tight space. I spent those 4 hours doing something I should have done earlier, a complete physical inventory of every accessible compartment. Results, written in the system log, emergency provisions, 8 crates. Contents, compressed ration blocks, 340 units total, approximately 1,800 calories each. At 2,000 calories per person per day, for 5 people, 34 days. Medical kit, full surgical set, antibiotics, 6 units of broad-spectrum antivirals, trauma supplies. Technical stores, 2 replacement filtration membranes, 1 spare ignition circuit board, various fasteners and sealant. Thermal blankets, 2, 34 days of food. That sounded like a lot until you remembered that 34 days from now the food would be gone and the world would still be on fire. The altitude run that night yielded 41 liters in 1 hour. System losses, 4 liters. Net, 37 liters. Arcore, WR7 performance within expected parameters. Projected daily yield at 2-hour run, 74 liters. Fuel cost per day, 68 liters. Net water gain, sustainable. I sat in the cockpit and looked at that word. Sustainable. It was the first time that word had applied to anything since I'd woken up. AVI updated, 20.129. The drone found them 3 days later. I'd been sending it on expanding arc patterns during the night altitude runs, passive sensors only, no emissions. On the 3rd night it came back with footage from a sealed emergency bunker sitting on a cooled lava shelf 31 kilometers south. Thermal signatures inside, 3 distinct human profiles. Alive. Not moving much, conserving heat, or injured, or both. I showed Jia the footage. She watched it twice. The bunker is military pattern. Pre-collapse emergency series. They've been in there a while. Look at the condensation pattern on the external vents. Weeks, not days. That means their air supply is running low. Yes. She paused. Or already has, and they're breathing recycled. I calculated the fuel cost. 31 kilometers south, retrieve, return approximately 180 liters round trip accounting for wind variance. Against current reserves of 810 liters. 22% of remaining fuel. It's expensive, Jia said. I know. We don't know who they are. I know. She looked at me with an expression that wasn't objection, more like making sure I was accounting for the variables. 3 unknowns in an enclosed system changes everything. Food consumption, air load, interpersonal dynamics. You're not just picking up crew. You're picking up 3 full sets of needs and histories. I need a navigator, I said. And a medic. And someone who can build a defensive system, because Jia, we are not going to stay invisible forever. She considered that. Hashtag. Fine. But I'm watching them for the first 48 hours. Agreed. We landed on the lava shelf at 0340 hours by the system clock, middle of the night cycle, visibility minimal, which was the point. The bunker door had an external release handle. I knocked on it first. Silence. Then a voice, muffled through the door, "Who's there?" Air Arkansas. We have power, air, water, and food. Door opens either way, from inside, or I can use the external release. Your choice. A long pause. The sound of at least 2 voices conferring. The door opened from inside. Chaman Jun came out first because he couldn't not be first. 26 years old, lean, moving with a physical confidence that was either skill or performance, I couldn't tell yet. He looked at the aircraft for exactly 3 seconds, then looked at me. What's the AVI? 29, who's flying it? I am. He looked at the cockpit layout through the open hatch. Something in his posture shifted, a settling, like a question had been answered that he hadn't consciously asked. I'm better than you, he said. Not aggressive. Factual. At flying. You need me. I know I need a navigator. I don't know yet if I need you. He thought about that for a moment. Then he got on board. Dr. Lee Sora came out second, helping the third person, an older man, Cha Minjun's uncle it turned out, who had a badly wrapped ankle injury. She had him stabilized and sitting inside the aircraft before I'd finished talking to Minjun. Efficient in the way that people are efficient when they've been doing something under pressure for a long time. She did the first thing that told me who she was. She took an air sample from inside the aircraft using a small handheld device she'd brought from the bunker. Looked at the reading. Then looked at me. CO2, nominal. Particulate, slightly elevated but acceptable. She put the device away. You have one filtration circuit running harder than the others. Left side, middle section. It'll need the membrane replaced in 8 to 12 days. So Jia, from the technical corridor doorway, 7 to 10. I've been watching it. Lee Sora looked at So Jia. Then nodded, once, with a precision that suggested she'd just filed So Jia under a specific category in her internal classification system. Then she came to me and said, quietly, closed environment. 5 people, now 6 with the uncle, but he's going back under when his ankle is stable, that's his choice. Chronic stress, resource scarcity, proximity. You're going to have interpersonal failures. Not maybe. Definitely. You need a conflict protocol. A what? Rules. Agreed in advance. For when people stop being rational. She looked at me steadily. Because they will. And if you don't have a framework when it happens, you'll lose someone either out the door or to something worse. I looked at her. Can you build that protocol? Already have a draft, she said. I built it in the bunker. I was hoping someone would show up who needed it. Kim Cheol came out last. 40-something, broad, military bearing that hadn't softened despite however long he'd been in that bunker. He did a complete visual circuit of the aircraft's exterior before getting on board, checking sightlines, entry points, structural vulnerabilities. Not hostile. Professional. He'd been security forces. He made that clear immediately, not as a boast but as a credential. He also, within 90 minutes of boarding, produced a handwritten document and posted it on the wall of the sleeping berth section. Compartment Use Regulations, Provisional. Drafted by Kim Cheol. Pending collective ratification. I read it. It was thorough. It covered sleeping rotation, movement protocols in the technical corridor, priority access to medical supplies, and at the bottom, in slightly heavier writing, a clause about major operational decisions requiring group consensus above AVI threshold 30. We were at AVI 29. I left the document on the wall. I didn't sign it. That evening, So Jia said to me quietly, let him post things. People who need visible order work better when they have it. It's not about order, I said. It's a power claim. Yes, she said. But it's a patient one. He's not moving yet. He's positioning. That night, after the altitude water run, I found the ration packs had been redistributed. 3 berths had full allocations, 1 had slightly more than standard, 1 had slightly less. I checked the drone's compartment log. The redistribution had happened at 2,210 hours. Kim Cheol, alone in the sleeping section for 8 minutes. I sat with that information for a while. Then, the next morning, at the group meal, all 5 of us in the main section for the first time, I said, without looking at anyone specifically. Rations are system allocated. The log tracks compartment access. Anyone who adjusts allocations unilaterally is reducing the mission's survival margin. Not their own margin. Everyone's. Minjun looked at his food. Lee Sora looked at Kim Cheol. Kim Cheol didn't change expression. He finished his meal and took his tray back to storage. He didn't do it again. Part 4, Base Building, Water, People, Food. The tail compartment opened at AVI 20. It took us 11 hours to get there. So Ja recalibrated the secondary filtration sensor that was 1.2 points. I rerouted the emergency lighting circuit through the main power bus, eliminating the battery drain that had been running quietly in the background since before I woke up, that was 0.6. So Ja found a pressure microleak in the aft sleeping berth I'd missed on my first walkthrough, that was 0.3. Numbers. Everything was numbers now. Arcor, AVI, 20.1. Tail compartment access, unlocked. The door released with a pressurized exhale, good seal, intact storage. Inside, 8 sealed emergency provision crates, a medical kit in a wall-mounted case, 2 folded thermal survival blankets, and in the far corner, bolted to the floor with 4 heavy clamps, a flat gray unit about the size of a storage chest with a label that had been partly burned and partly scraped off. What remained? Atmocon WR7 water recovery, atmospheric con, the rest was gone. So Ja crouched next to it and ran her hands along the casing seams. Military issue. WR7 series. Pulls moisture from air at altitude, runs it through a 3-stage purification column, outputs drinkable water. She stood. Rated for 8 to 11 kilometers altitude. At lower altitude the yield drops significantly. How significantly? At 600 meters, maybe 12 liters per hour. We need 60 per day for 5 people. She looked at me. 5? We're going to need more crew. She said nothing for a moment. Then, at 9 kilometers altitude, yield is approximately 38 liters per hour. 2 hours per day at that altitude gives you 76 liters. Minus system losses, call it 68. 68 liters. Enough. What does the altitude run cost? Arcor, fuel consumption at 9 kilometers altitude versus cruise altitude, approximately 34% higher per hour. 2-hour run, equivalent to 68 liters of fuel. Daily cost. 68 liters of fuel per day to produce 68 liters of water. I ran that through twice to make sure I hadn't made an error. That's a direct trade, I said. Fuel for water. Yes, so Ja said. Every day. Then we need more fuel before we can run the water system sustainably. Yes. I looked at the unit. Then at the provision crates, I'd count those later. Then at the schematic. Install it. We run the first collection tonight to test the system. 1 hour, not 2, I want the yield data before I commit to the fuel cost daily. So Ja was already opening the clamps. Note A, water. The WR7 installation took Soja 4 hours and required the drone for 2 of them. Routing the output line through the existing plumbing architecture was a precise job in a tight space. I spent those 4 hours doing something I should have done earlier, a complete physical inventory of every accessible compartment. Results, written in the system log, emergency provisions, 8 crates. Contents, compressed ration blocks, 340 units total, approximately 1,800 calories each. At 2,000 calories per person per day, for 5 people, 34 days. Medical kit, full surgical set, antibiotics, 6 units of broad-spectrum antivirals, trauma supplies. Technical stores, 2 replacement filtration membranes, 1 spare ignition circuit board, various fasteners and sealant. Thermal blankets, 2. 34 days of food. That sounded like a lot until you remembered that 34 days from now the food would be gone and the world would still be on fire. The altitude run that night yielded 41 liters in 1 hour. System losses, 4 liters. Net, 37 liters. Arcor, WR7 performance within expected parameters. Projected daily yield at 2-hour run, 74 liters. Fuel cost per day, 68 liters. Net water gain, sustainable. I sat in the cockpit and looked at that word. Sustainable. It was the first time that word had applied to anything since I'd woken up. AVI updated, 20.129. The drone found them 3 days later. I'd been sending it on expanding arc patterns during the night altitude runs, passive sensors only, no emissions. On the 3rd night it came back with footage from a sealed emergency bunker sitting on a cooled lava shelf 31 kilometers south. Thermal signatures inside, 3 distinct human profiles. Alive. Not moving much, conserving heat, or injured, or both. I showed So-jia the footage. She watched it twice. The bunker is military pattern. Pre-collapse emergency series. They've been in there a while. Look at the condensation pattern on the external vents. Weeks, not days. That means their air supply is running low. Yes. She paused. Or already has, and they're breathing recycled. I calculated the fuel cost. 31 kilometers south, retrieve, return approximately 180 liters round trip accounting for wind variance. Against current reserves of 810 liters. 22% of remaining fuel. It's expensive, So-jia said. I know. We don't know who they are. I know. She looked at me with an expression that wasn't objection, more like making sure I was accounting for the variables. 3 unknowns in an enclosed system changes everything. Food consumption, air load, interpersonal dynamics. You're not just picking up crew. You're picking up 3 full sets of needs and histories. I need a navigator, I said. And a medic. And someone who can build a defensive system, because So-jia, we are not going to stay invisible forever. She considered that. Fine. But I'm watching them for the first 48 hours. Agreed. Note B, people, we landed on the lava shelf at 0340 hours by the system clock, middle of the night cycle, visibility minimal, which was the point. The bunker door had an external release handle. I knocked on it first. Silence. Then a voice, muffled through the door, who's there? Air Arkansas. We have power, air, water, and food. Door opens either way, from inside, or I can use the external release. Your choice. A long pause. The sound of at least 2 voices conferring. The door opened from inside. Cha Min-jun came out first because he couldn't not be first. 26 years old, lean, moving with a physical confidence that was either skill or performance, I couldn't tell yet. He looked at the aircraft for exactly 3 seconds, then looked at me. What's the AVI? 29, who's flying it? I am. He looked at the cockpit layout through the open hatch. Something in his posture shifted, a settling, like a question had been answered that he hadn't consciously asked. I'm better than you, he said. Not aggressive. Factual. At flying. You need me. I know I need a navigator. I don't know yet if I need you. He thought about that for a moment. Then he got on board. Dr. Lee Sara came out second, helping the third person, an older man, Cha Min-jun's uncle it turned out, who had a badly wrapped ankle injury. She had him stabilized and sitting inside the aircraft before I'd finished talking to Min-jun. Efficient in the way that people are efficient when they've been doing something under pressure for a long time. Hashtag. She did the first thing that told me who she was. She took an air sample from inside the aircraft using a small handheld device she'd brought from the bunker. Looked at the reading. Then looked at me. CO2, nominal. Particulate, slightly elevated but acceptable. She put the device away. You have one filtration circuit running harder than the others. Left side, middle section. It'll need the membrane replaced in 8 to 12 days. So-jia, from the technical corridor doorway, 7 to 10. I've been watching it. Lee Sora looked at So-jia. Then nodded, once, with a precision that suggested she just filed So-jia under a specific category in her internal classification system. Then she came to me and said, quietly, closed environment. 5 people, now 6 with the uncle, but he's going back under when his ankle is stable, that's his choice. Chronic stress, resource scarcity, proximity. You're going to have interpersonal failures. Not maybe. Definitely. You need a conflict protocol. A what? Rules. Agreed in advance. For when people stop being rational. She looked at me steadily. Because they will. And if you don't have a framework when it happens, you'll lose someone either out the door or to something worse. I looked at her. Can you build that protocol? Already have a draft, she said. I built it in the bunker. I was hoping someone would show up who needed it. Kim Cheol came out last. 40-something, broad, military bearing that hadn't softened despite however long he'd been in that bunker. He did a complete visual circuit of the aircraft's exterior before getting on board, checking sightlines, entry points, structural vulnerabilities. Not hostile. Professional. He'd been security forces. He made that clear immediately, not as a boast but as a credential. He also, within 90 minutes of boarding, produced a handwritten document and posted it on the wall of the sleeping berth section. Compartment Use Regulations, Provisional. Drafted by Kim Cheol. Pending collective ratification. I read it. It was thorough. It covered sleeping rotation, movement protocols in the technical corridor, priority access to medical supplies, and at the bottom, in slightly heavier writing, a clause about major operational decisions requiring group consensus above AVI threshold 30. We were at AVI 29. I left the document on the wall. I didn't sign it. That evening, Soja said to me quietly, "Let him post things. People who need visible order work better when they have it." "It's not about order," I said. "It's a power claim." "Yes," she said. "But it's a patient one. He's not moving yet. He's positioning." That night, after the altitude water run, I found the ration packs had been redistributed. 3 berths had full allocations, 1 had slightly more than standard, 1 had slightly less. I checked the drone's compartment log. The redistribution had happened at 2,210 hours. Kim Cheol, alone in the sleeping section for 8 minutes. I sat with that information for a while. Then, the next morning, at the group meal, all 5 of us in the main section for the first time, I said, without looking at anyone specifically, "Rations are system allocated. The log tracks compartment access. Anyone who adjusts allocations unilaterally is reducing the mission's survival margin. Not their own margin. Everyone's." Minjun looked at his food. Lee Sora looked at Kim Cheol. Kim Cheol didn't change expression. He finished his meal and took his tray back to storage. He didn't do it again. Node C, food. The hydroponic module was in the 3rd emergency provision crate, sealed, compact, designed for exactly this kind of scenario. Military issue, self-contained, rated for a 4 by 2 meter growing surface. First yield, 18 days at optimal conditions. Optimal conditions required: stable temperature between 18 and 24 degrees, 14 hours of artificial light per day, 12 liters of water per day for the growing surface, and a location away from vibration sources and direct heat radiation. The aircraft had none of those locations available without modification. Soja identified the problem immediately. Central cargo section is the best option geometrically. But it shares a wall with the power unit corridor. Ambient temperature, 31 degrees. Too hot. Minjun, what if we reroute the ventilation flow to cool that section specifically? Soja, it costs 8 power units per hour to run the supplemental cooling at the level we need. Me, 8 units per hour, 14 hours of light cycle, that's 112 units per day against a 100 unit daily output. A silence. Lee Sara, not continuously. The plants need 14 hours of light. They don't need 14 hours of active cooling, only during the light cycle when the lamps generate heat. Actual cooling requirement, 11 hours. 88 units. Another silence. Different quality, the kind where someone has just solved something. Soja looked at Lee Sora with an expression I hadn't seen her use yet. Not approval exactly. Acknowledgement. 88 units, I said. That leaves 12 in reserve. Which is worse than the 7 we had before, because we also have more systems running. Yes, Lee Sora said. But we have food in 18 days. Or we have 34 days of rations and nothing after. The choice wasn't actually a choice. We moved the module. It took all 5 of us to do it properly. The module weighed 140 kilograms and had to come through a corridor rated for single-person passage. Soja directed. Minjun and Kim Cheol took the weight. They were the strongest and they both knew it, which created a brief silent competition about who was carrying more. That Lee Sara and I both noticed and neither of us mentioned. The drone spotted a misaligned mounting bracket and beeped twice until Minjun fixed it. Soja, wrong side. Minjun, it fits. So Jia, it fits in correctly. Vibration will crack the reservoir in 40 hours. Minjun started to argue. Lee Sora, fix it. Flat, final, no room for discussion. Minjun fixed it. When the module was seated and locked and the connections run, we all stood in the central cargo section looking at it. Small, utilitarian, completely mundane looking. The first living thing on the aircraft that was supposed to grow. Kim Cheol broke the silence. 18 days is a long time. Yes, I said. Don't eat ahead of schedule. He looked at me. There was something in it, not hostility. More like he was measuring something and hadn't finished yet. I ran the full inventory that night. Out loud, because the habit was useful and because the drone seemed to pay attention. Avi, 51. Here's what that actually means: air, stable. Filtration membrane on the left circuit, 7 to 10 days before replacement. One spare membrane in stores. Water, 68 to 74 liters per day, sustainable. Fuel cost, 68 liters per day. Not ideal but workable. Food, 34 days of rations. Hydroponic module active, first yield day 18. After that, partial food independence. Fuel, 630 liters. Approximately 4 hours, 15 minutes operational range. Lower than I'd like. Power, 100 units output. 40 filtration, 20 unit cooling, 15 lighting indoors, 11 hydroponic cooling, 6 WR7 water system. Total committed, 92. Reserve, 8 units. 8. Crew, 5 people. 1 engineer who knows more than she tells me. 1 pilot who's probably right about being the best available. 1 doctor who already sees the cracks forming. 1 security officer who's building something I haven't named yet. 1 me. Drone operational, 94% battery. Threats: the scavenger group is still out there. We haven't seen them since the Ash Column maneuver. That doesn't mean they're gone. Hull Zone C stress point needs a full inspection. So Ja has been saying this for 4 days. ArcCore, summary accurate. Note, communication array passive reception has logged 3 distinct encrypted signal sources in the past 72 hours. 2 are consistent with scavenger band frequencies. 1 is not. Signal 3, military encryption. Origin, unknown. Bearing, north-northwest. I stopped. Military encryption. ArcCore, confirmed. Standard pre-collapse military protocol. Source unknown. Signal is not directed at this aircraft, it appears to be a beacon. Repeating pattern. Has been transmitting for at least the duration of our current monitoring window. A beacon. Something broadcasting. To anyone who could hear it. Or to something specific that hadn't answered yet. I looked at the schematic. North-northwest. So Jia came to find me an hour later. She had the notebook in her hand, the previous operator's maintenance log that she'd had since the first day and told me about on day 3. She set it on the console between us. There's a section at the back, she said. Not maintenance records. Personal entries. Last one is dated 4 days before the collapse. What does it say? He knew it was coming. She said it without inflection. Not the lava specifically. But he knew something was going to happen. And he knew why. A pause. He wrote that he'd filed a report. Military chain. Evidence of what was being planned and who had authorized it. I looked at the notebook. And the report? He sent it north-northwest. She looked at me steadily. To a military installation. One that had a separate power supply. One that was built to survive almost anything. The beacon. North-northwest. So Jia, I said carefully. Where were you working before the collapse? A silence that lasted exactly long enough to confirm what I already suspected. I was a contractor, she said. Thermal systems. Military contracts. Another pause. I didn't know what the project was for. I knew what I was building. I didn't know why. But Lee Sora does. So Jia said nothing. She knows the project. She knows the name. That's why she has that. Part 4, Base Building, Water, People, Food. The tail compartment opened at AVI 20. It took us 11 hours to get there. So Jia rebuilt the thermal assembly correctly, full orientation, proper contact surface, efficiency up to 81% of rated capacity. The drone assisted. I rerouted 2 power circuits that were bleeding energy into dead systems, recovering 9 units that went straight into reserve. Reserve climbed from 7 to 16. Arc Core, AVI Update, 1820. Tail compartment, unlocked. The door was heavy, military grade, sealed with a mechanical latch system that didn't need power. I pulled it open. Inside, 6 sealed emergency supply crates stacked against the left wall, a fold-down workbench, 2 equipment lockers, and bolted to the rear bulkhead, the water recovery module. Atmospheric condensate type, military issue, rated for high-altitude low-humidity environments. So Jia stood next to me and looked at it. "That's a good find," she said. Coming from her, that was excessive praise. The module worked on a simple principle: pull air through a cooling coil at altitude, collect the moisture that condenses out, filter it, store it. At ground level in this atmosphere, ash, heat, toxic particulates, it produced almost nothing. At 8,000 meters, where the air was cold and the moisture had nowhere else to go, it could produce 40 to 60 liters per day. The problem was fuel. Climbing to 8,000 meters and holding position burned approximately 18% more fuel per hour than cruise altitude. The math was uncomfortable. Current fuel, 870 liters. Cruise range, 5 hours, 50 minutes. High altitude hold, approximately 4 hours, 50 minutes per full tank. "We can't afford daily climbs," I said. "So Jia, we can't afford not to. 5 people need 10 liters of water each per day minimum. We have 40 liters in reserve. 4 days. We don't have 5 people. Not yet." I looked at her. She said nothing else. Just started examining the module's inlet coils. I ran the numbers 3 times before I found the compromise: climb to altitude once every 36 hours, during the lowest demand power window, night cycle, when the thermal assembly runs coolest and the reserve is highest. Each climb produces 50 liters on average. 2 people need 20 liters per day. Net gain per 36-hour cycle, 30 liters. Fuel cost per climb, 90 liters. It worked. Barely. And it only worked for 2 people. So Jia was right: if the crew grew, the math broke and we'd need either more fuel or a better solution. "Night climbs," I told her. "Every 36 hours. She nodded once. "And when we find an engineer who knows condensate systems, we improve the inlet efficiency. We're not looking for people yet." "You're not," she said. "I am." The first night climb happened 18 hours later. "Mind June, still no." "Not yet." I flew it alone while So Jia monitored the power unit. 8,200 meters, temperature outside -31 degrees, the hull creaking in ways that sounded structural but weren't. Thermal contraction, so Jia had said, normal for this airframe at altitude. The condensate module ran for 2 hours and 40 minutes. Output, 44 liters. I held the aircraft steady and watched the collection gauge climb and thought about how strange it was that survival had come down to watching water drip into a tank at 8,000 meters above a dead world. Arc core, hull stress sensors, nominal. Right wing vibration, 0.3 mm amplitude at primary spar. Within tolerance. Note, tolerance defined for new airframe. Current airframe age and condition may reduce effective tolerance threshold. Define may reduce. Arc core, insufficient data for precise estimate. Recommend So Jia inspect primary spar on next maintenance cycle. Noted. I descended at 3 o'clock and reported 44 liters to So Jia, who was awake and already writing something. "Good," she said. "Eat something." There was food in the emergency crates, military ration packs, vacuum sealed, 12 of them. Each pack was 2,100 calories, designed for a single person for 1 day. 12 packs. 2 people. 6 days. Not enough. But the tail compartment had also contained one more thing I hadn't catalogued yet, a Type 4 compact hydroponic module, military issue, still in its factory casing. Sealed. And used. I'd seen it when we first opened the compartment and flagged it mentally. Now I pulled the casing specs. Arcor, Type 4 compact hydroponic module. Inputs required, water 8 liters per day minimum. Light 14 hours per cycle, 200 watts. Temperature 18 to 24 degrees Celsius. Space minimum 4 square meters floor area. First harvest cycle, 16 to 20 days. Sustained output at full operation, approximately 1,400 calories per day. 1,400 calories. One person's minimum. Not enough for 2, far short of enough for 5 or 6. But combined with rationing, it was the difference between a countdown and a system. The space requirement was the problem. The technical corridor was too narrow. The pressurized bunk zone was the only area with 4 square meters of usable floor, but it was also sleeping space, and if we added people, we'd need both. I told So-ja. She looked at the module specs for a moment. Central cargo bay. It's partially blocked by the fuel line housing, but the floor space is there if you move the housing bracket 40 centimeters. You said moving that bracket weakens the frame near the gear housing. It does. By about 8%. At our current operating weight, that's acceptable. At current weight. If we add people and cargo, then we reinforce before we add load. In that order. She looked at me. You're thinking like you have time to do things perfectly. You don't. Do it good enough, then better. I moved the bracket the next morning. The hydroponic module went into the central cargo bay. So-ja connected the water lines, I ran the power routing, and the drone spent 4 hours holding components in place while both of us worked around it. Arcor, Type 4 hydroponic module, online. Estimated first harvest, 18 days. Current water allocation adjusted. Daily water budget, collection 44 liters, module consumption 8 liters, crew consumption 20 liters, reserve accumulation 16 liters per 36-hour cycle. First time the reserve number had gone positive. The drone found them on day 4. I'd been sending it on 90-minute reconnaissance loops, northeast first, then east, then south, rotating sectors. It came back from the eastern loop with a video sequence I watched 3 times. A bunker. Pre-collapse construction, built into the base of a cooled lava ridge, the entrance sealed with a manual door that had been recently cleared of ash debris. Someone had cleared it recently, the scrape marks in the ash were fresh. A small atmospheric vent on the roof was running, pulling air, meaning there was power inside and people breathing. 3 heat signatures through the drone's thermal sensor. Stationary. Together. Arcor, location, 34 kilometers east. Approach route, navigable. Fuel cost, approximately 140 liters round trip. Crew complement would increase resource consumption. Current sustainability threshold, 3 additional people maximum at current production rates. I showed So-ja the video. She watched it once. Then, the one on the left is taller than the others. Military posture, look at how they're standing even sitting down. She pointed at the thermal shape. And the vent system on that bunker is a Type 9 military atmospheric unit. Whoever set that up knew what they were doing. Could be dangerous. Everyone out here is dangerous. She looked at me. The question is whether they're useful. We landed 200 meters from the bunker entrance and waited. 8 minutes of nothing. Then the door opened. Not fast, slowly, with deliberate care. The person who came out first was a man, late 20s, moving with the kind of unconscious physical confidence that either meant he knew what he was doing or thought he did. He looked at the aircraft the way Min-jun would later look at everything, like it was something to be solved. Cha Min-jun. Navigator. 26 years old. He told me his qualifications inside of 90 seconds without being asked, which told me something about him immediately. I've logged 4,200 hours in fixed-wing military aircraft, he said. I can dead reckon a course to within 2 kilometers over 500 kilometers using pressure altitude and drift estimate alone. I held the rank of What do you want? I said. A pause. He recalibrated. Full autonomy in the cockpit. No one overrides my flight decisions while I'm at the controls. Navigation decisions are yours. Tactical decisions are mine. Those overlap. They do. When they overlap, we discuss. You don't act unilaterally. He thought about that for 3 seconds. Acceptable. The second person out of the bunker was Dr. Lee Sora. 38, quiet in the way that meant she was always processing more than she was saying. She asked to see the air quality readings before she said anything else. I showed her. She studied them for a moment. Your CO2 variance is slightly high, she said. Not dangerous, but consistent with a filter that's been running without calibration. It'll start affecting sleep quality in about 12 days. Can you calibrate it? I can. But that's not why you need me. She looked at the aircraft. Enclosed group, chronic stress, resource scarcity, no external authority structure. I've read the literature on what happens in those conditions. You need a protocol for conflict before conflict needs you. What kind of protocol? The kind where people don't kill each other over ration packs. A pause. I watched what happened in the Jindo shelter. 43 people. 3 months. No protocol. 11 survivors. She said it without drama. Just the number. I was one of the 11. The third person was Kim Cheol. Former security officer, 43, built like someone who'd spent a career carrying weight without complaining about it. He came out of the bunker last, looked at the aircraft for a long moment, then looked at me. Who's in command? He said. I am. I'm the operator. Command structure? Flat for now. Decisions go through me. He nodded slowly. That kind of slow nod that means the person is filing the answer away rather than agreeing with it. I can provide physical security, maintenance support for structural components, and defensive systems integration if you have any hardware. We're building toward that. Good. He looked at the aircraft again. I'll want to see the structural integrity report on that gear housing bracket before I sign off on loading this vehicle with additional personnel. So Ja, from somewhere inside the aircraft, I like him. By the time we got everyone aboard and secured, the ration count had changed. 5 people. 12 ration packs remaining. 2 days and 10 hours of food supply. I said it out loud, at the workbench in the central cargo bay, with all 5 of us present, ration packs, 12. 5 people at standard consumption, 2.5 days. Hydroponic module produces first harvest in 18 days. Water, sustainable at current crew size, marginally. Power, stable. Fuel, 730 liters, approximately 4 hours, 55 minutes range. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Kim Cheol, 16 days of food shortfall. We need a secondary source. Minjun, there's a military logistics depot listed in the navigation records I pulled from my bunker's database. 280 kilometers northwest. Pre-collapse inventory would include ration stores, fuel, possibly medical supplies. 280 kilometers is outside our fuel range, so Ja said. One-way trip isn't, Minjun said. We go, we refuel from depot stores, we come back. I looked at the fuel numbers. 730 liters. 280 kilometers northwest. The route would take us over 2 major lava flow corridors and 1 documented high-temperature atmospheric zone. What's the fuel cost for that route? Minjun pulled up his navigation display. He worked fast, I noticed that. 630 liters to get there. Assuming depot fuel is compatible and accessible, we refuel and return. Net gain, whatever's in the depot minus transit cost. 630 liters. We had 730. That left 100 liters, under 40 minutes, for anything that went wrong on the approach. Not yet, I said. Minjun looked at me. The route crosses a high-temperature zone. Our Zone C hull stress hasn't been fully assessed post-climb. We have 18 days until the hydroponic module produces. We ration down to 1,400 calories per person per day and we're at 17 days on current packs. We make it. Barely, Minjun said. Barely is enough. We don't take a 630-liter trip on 730 liters with an uninspected hull joint and a crew that's been together for 4 hours. Minjun sat back. Not conceding. Filing it away. The depot run was Minjun's idea. But by the time we voted on it, it felt like everyone's. That was the problem. It had been 11 days since we picked up the 3 from the bunker. 11 days of rationing, altitude water runs, hydroponic monitoring, hull checks, power cycling, and 5 people living in a space designed for cargo. Lee Sora's conflict protocol was posted on the wall next to Kim Cheol's compartment regulations, 2 documents nobody officially endorsed and everyone unofficially obeyed. The hydroponic module was on day 11 of 18. The drone had found nothing useful within 80 kilometers in any direction. And the ration count was at 31 packs for 5 people. 6 days. I ran the numbers every morning. They didn't change. Minjun brought the depot plan back on day 9. He'd refined it. New routing, updated fuel calculations, thermal zone avoidance built in. He'd been working on it alone in the cockpit during his monitoring shifts, pulling data from every navigational source he could access. He presented it at the workbench with all 5 of us present. Updated route avoids the primary thermal corridor. We go at 3,000 meters, cooler than surface, below the worst ash concentration. Fuel cost, 580 liters one way, not 630. I found a lower drag routing through the eastern pass. He pointed at the map. Total round trip assuming 90 minutes at depot for loading, 1,160 liters plus buffer. Current fuel, 810 liters. He looked at me. We still need depot fuel to get home. But the margin is better. I looked at the numbers. 810 liters available. 580 to get there. 230 remaining on arrival. 580 to get back. Deficit, 350 liters. Needs to be found at the depot. What's the probability the depot fuel is accessible? High, Minjun said. Pre-collapse military logistics depots are built to survive structural damage. The fuel storage is underground, reinforced, accessed via manual pumping system that doesn't need grid power. So Jia, what's the thermal status of the hull? Zone C stress point, I inspected it 2 days ago. Minor fatigue at the bracket join. Within tolerance at current operating weight. So Jia looked at me. Not objection. The look she used when she was making sure I heard something. Within current tolerance, I said. Yes, Minjun said. Current. Lee Sara, what's our food situation if we don't go? 6 days, I said. Hydroponic module produces on day 18. That's 1 day after we run out. A silence. Kim Cheol, we go. The math says we go. Minjun looked at me. I ran the calculation one more time. 580 liters, 3,000 meters altitude, thermal zone avoided, hull within tolerance, depot access probable, first harvest 1 day past the food deadline. The math said we go. We go, I said. Pre-flight full inspection. Zone C gets a secondary check. We take the drone for thermal mapping of the approach route. We leave in 12 hours. Minjun nodded once. Satisfied. But not gloating, he'd learned that much in 11 days. So Jia said nothing. She went to the technical corridor. I should have followed her. Pre-flight took 4 hours. I checked the Zone C bracket twice. The fatigue crack was their hairline, for centimeters, running along the joint between the gear housing bracket and the lower hull frame. Within tolerance by the standard spec. But the standard spec was written for a new airframe. I looked at it for a long time. Arcor, Zone C stress fracture, current length 4.1 centimeters. Propagation rate under standard operating conditions, estimated 0.2 centimeters per hour at cruise. Estimated 0.6 centimeters per hour under thermal stress conditions. Failure threshold, fracture length 12 centimeters. Standard cruise, 20 hours before failure threshold. Under thermal stress, 13 hours. The round trip was 9 hours. I told myself that was fine. Then I told Minjun, who nodded and said, "We'll stay below the thermal thresholds." Then I told Sojia. She looked at me for a moment. "What's the propagation rate under vibration stress from a lateral thermal updraft?" I looked at ArcCore. ArcCore, insufficient data for precise calculation. Lateral updraft vibration profiles for this route are not in navigational database. Estimate, higher than cruise rate, lower than direct thermal stress. "We don't have the data," I said. Sojia, "No. We don't." She didn't say anything else. She went back to the thermal assembly check. I said, "Sojia, if you think we shouldn't go, I think the math says you should go," she said, without turning around. "I think the math is missing a variable. But I can't give you the number for the variable, so I can't tell you not to go." I should have heard that differently. I heard, "She can't tell me not to go." I should have heard, "She's telling me something is missing." We lifted at 0600. Minjun took the controls for the first time on a real route. Whatever I thought about his self-assessment, the first 10 minutes resolved it. He flew the aircraft like it was an extension of his nervous system. Smooth altitude management, precise course corrections, fuel consumption running 4% below his own projection. "You're good," I said. "I know," he said. Not unkindly. Just accurate. Lee Sora was in the main section, running a medical inventory she'd been putting together since day 2. Kim Cheol was in the technical corridor doing a structural walkthrough, his own initiative, thorough, methodical. So Zhao was at the power unit monitoring station, watching the thermal assembly data in real time. The drone was running ahead of us at 4 kilometers, thermal mapping the route. For the first 160 kilometers, everything was exactly right. At kilometer 163, the drone's map showed a lateral updraft corridor running northeast to southwest across our path. The mapping data gave it a width of approximately 12 kilometers. Temperature differential from ambient, 47 degrees. Not in Minjun's routing. Not because he'd missed it, it hadn't been there when he planned the route. The lava flow patterns below had shifted in the 11 days since his navigation database was compiled. The updraft was new. "Options," I said. "Minjun, climb over it takes us to 5,500 meters, fuel cost plus 40 liters, adds 18 minutes to route. Or we descend to 800 meters and go under it, the thermal differential is minimal that close to surface. 800 meters puts us in the particulate layer. For 12 kilometers. 6 minutes at cruise speed." I looked at the fuel numbers. 40 extra liters on the high route put our arrival reserve at 190 instead of 230. Still workable. "We go high," I said. "Climb to 5,500. At 5,500 meters, the lateral updraft's upper edge caught us. It shouldn't have reached that high. The drone's mapping had shown it topping out at 5,200 meters. But thermal columns in an active lava environment don't hold their shape, they pulse. We hit the upper pulse of a 5,400 meter surge as we crossed the eastern edge of the corridor. The aircraft lurched. Not catastrophic, a single sharp lateral displacement, maybe 8 meters, Minjun correcting instantly and precisely. But the vibration came with it, a resonant shudder through the whole airframe, concentrated at the lower hull. I was watching the Zone C indicator. The fracture went from 4.1 centimeters to 5.8 centimeters in under 4 seconds. ArcCore, Zone C stress fracture, 5.8 centimeters. Propagation rate under current conditions, elevated. Recommend immediate assessment. Sojia. I see it. Her voice was completely level. Propagation has stopped for now. We're through the updraft. But Taeyun, the vibration profile from that pulse hit the secondary join at the port gear housing. Not the primary fracture. The secondary join. What's the secondary join rated for? A pause. The kind that means the answer is not good. It's not rated for lateral vibration at this temperature differential. It's a single shear fastener arrangement. Standard for this airframe, But standard was written for a world that doesn't have 400-degree lava flows generating thermal turbulence at 5,000 meters. Minjun, quietly, do we turn back? I looked at the fuel. We'd burned 310 liters to get here. 500 remaining. To turn back, 270 liters. We'd arrive with 230 liters and no depot fuel and 6 days of food. To continue, 270 liters to the depot. We'd arrive with 230 liters and then needed 350 liters to get home, still a deficit we needed the depot to fill, same as always. The math hadn't changed. The hull had. How long until we reached the depot at current speed? Minjun, 94 minutes. So Jia, 94 minutes at cruise with the secondary join in current condition. Probability assessment. A longer pause. If we don't hit another lateral thermal event, manageable. If we do, she stopped. I can't give you a number. I don't have the failure curve data for the secondary join under these specific conditions. The second time in 24 hours I'd gotten that answer. I looked at the map. The drone was 4 kilometers ahead, mapping clear air all the way to the depot. Clear air. We continue, I said. Minjun, any deviation from planned route requires my explicit approval. No judgment calls. Understood. So Jia, continuous monitoring. If the secondary join shows any movement, you tell me immediately. Yes. We flew on. At kilometer 241, everything was still fine. Lee Sora brought 2 ration packs to the cockpit, one for me, one for Minjun. We were 39 kilometers from the depot. Minjun was talking about the return route, drawing a revised course on his map overlay, already thinking about the next problem. Kim Cheol came forward from the technical corridor. Sat in the jump seat behind us. Said nothing. Just watched. I ate the ration pack and thought, maybe I was wrong to worry. I was thinking that exact thought when So Jia's voice came through the intercom. Tae Yoon. Just my name. That was all. But the tone was the tone of someone who has been watching a number move and has just watched it move somewhere bad. The second updraft wasn't on the drone's map because the drone was 4 kilometers ahead and the updraft was forming directly beneath us, a rapid convective cell rising from a new lava fracture that had opened sometime in the last few hours, invisible until we were over it. We hit it at altitude 3,000 meters, directly above 380 degrees surface temperature, 39 kilometers from the depot. It wasn't like the first hit. The first hit was a lateral displacement, sharp, singular, manageable. This was a sustained vertical surge, 11 seconds of upward force against the lower hull while Minjun fought to hold course and altitude. I heard the secondary join go. Not an explosion. Not a catastrophic failure. A sound like a bolt shearing, one sharp metallic crack, fell through the floor panels more than heard. And then the portside gear housing bracket shifted. 4 centimeters. Enough to change the load path through the lower hull. Enough to put stress on the next fastener in the sequence. Our core, port gear housing secondary join, failed. Load transferred to tertiary fastener array. Tertiary array, rated for this load, marginally. Left cargo bay pressure differential, rising. Recommend immediate assessment. So Jia, on the intercom, left cargo bay. The pressure seal at the lower join is deforming. It hasn't failed, but it will fail if we take another hit or if we increase speed. Kim Cheol was already moving. Through the main section, into the cargo bay, hands on the inspection panel. His voice came back 30 seconds later, the lower seal is bowing. There's a 4 centimeter gap opening at the floor join. I can get a manual compression clamp on it if I have 90 seconds. Do it. 94 seconds later, clamped. It's holding. But Taeyoon, everything behind this bulkhead needs to be considered compromised. If we take another structural event, the seal fails and the bay depressurizes. Left cargo bay. I ran through the inventory in my head. The left cargo bay contained 6 of our remaining 14 ration packs. The spare filtration membrane. And the hydroponic module's water reservoir, the 80-liter tank that had been accumulating water for 12 days. So Jia. My voice was even. I made it even. If the left cargo bay depressurizes at altitude, we lose everything in it. She said it before I finished. And the decompression will stress zone C further. The primary fracture will propagate. We could lose the gear housing entirely. Minjun said nothing. He was flying. I looked at the map. 39 kilometers to the depot. 231 liters of fuel. ARCOR, Structural Integrity Assessment, current configuration can sustain cruise flight in stable air conditions. Probability of maintaining integrity over 39 kilometers in current atmospheric conditions, 71%. Probability of maintaining integrity over 270 kilometers return journey without depot refuel and structural repair, 34%. 34%. I stared at that number. 71% forward, into the unknown, with a compromised hull and a bay that would fail if the air moved wrong. 34% back, over 270 kilometers, on fumes, already damaged. Neither number was good. Neither number was safe. And then Kim Cheol said, from the cargo bay, Taeyun. I need you to come look at something. He was standing at the bulkhead between the left cargo bay and the central section. His hand was on the manual emergency seal, the lever that would close the blast door between sections, permanently separating the cargo bay from the rest of the aircraft. If the seal fails in flight, he said, we lose the cargo bay to decompression. The pressure wave will, I know what it will do. Then you know I should seal this now. Before it fails on its own. Controlled separation is survivable. Emergency decompression is not. I looked at the lever. Then at the cargo bay beyond it, the ration packs, the membrane, the water reservoir. 80 liters of water that had taken 12 altitude runs to accumulate. If you seal it now, we lose everything in there. If I don't seal it and the bay fails at the wrong moment, we lose the aircraft and everything in it. He looked at me steadily. This isn't a vote. This is physics. He wasn't wrong. I looked at the ration packs. Counted them through the viewport in the door. 6 packs. 6 days of food for one person. Less than 2 days for 5 people. Seal it, I said. Kim Cheol pulled the lever. The blast door engaged with a sound like a safe closing. The system registered it immediately. ARCOR, left cargo bay, isolated. Contents, inaccessible. Hull integrity, stabilized. Food stores, 8 packs remaining. Filtration membrane, lost. Water reserve, 80 liters lost. AVI impact, recalculating. The AVI dropped on the screen in front of me. AVI, 5138. Minjun landed us at the depot 22 minutes later. It was there. The fuel was there, underground tanks, manual pumps, intact. Kim Cheol and Minjun worked the pumps while So Jia and I assessed the hull. She ran her hands along the Zone C fracture for a long time without speaking. 4.1 to 6.9 centimeters, she said finally. The secondary joint failure redistributed load onto the primary fracture during the second event. It's stable now, but the fracture geometry has changed, it's no longer purely linear. There's a branch developing at the western end. What does that mean for the return trip? It means the failure threshold I calculated this morning is wrong. The branching changes the stress concentration. The primary fracture could propagate faster than my original estimate, or slower, depending on load distribution. I don't have the data to tell you which. Another missing variable. She looked at me. You heard me this morning, right? Before we left? Yes. What did you hear? I was quiet for a moment. I heard that you couldn't give me the number. And what should you have heard? I said nothing. That I was telling you we were flying without complete information. She turned back to the hull. We'll need 4 hours of repair work before the return flight. I'll need the drone. And Taeyun on the way back. Minjun gets no discretionary routing. Every meter of that course is mine to approve. Agreed. And we discuss the depot run at 280 kilometers before we have 6 days of food left next time. Agreed. She went to get the drone. I sat on the depot floor while the fuel pumps ran and the repair work was being laid out, and I opened the system log to write the post-incident entry. Arcor, recommend reviewing previous operator's log, entry 7. Relevant to current situation. I pulled up entry 7. The previous operator wrote in short, direct sentences, the same instinct I'd been developing. The entry was dated approximately 4 months before the collapse. Day 34. Ran the fuel route to Depot 11 with 2 crew. Everything calculated correctly. Everything failed correctly. Lost the starboard water tank and 40% of food reserves. We turned back in time, but only because Yuna told me twice before I listened. Next time I will listen the first time. There is no situation where I can't give you the number means proceed anyway. It means, you don't have the number. Don't proceed. I read it twice. Then I closed the log and didn't write anything. The repair work took 4 hours and 12 minutes. Soja rebuilt the secondary join with salvaged fasteners from the depot's mechanical stores, not perfect, not rated for the same load as the original, but properly assembled and correctly oriented. How long will it hold? I asked. Long enough to get home. A pause. If we don't hit anything. And the primary fracture? Stable for now. Don't stress it. She looked at me. That means no thermal zones, no altitude above 4,000 meters, no hard maneuvers. Minjun's route goes exactly where I say it goes. Minjun, who'd been listening, understood. He said it without argument, without the filing it away quality his agreements usually had. He'd stood at the cargo bay door when Kim Cheol pulled the lever. He'd seen the AVI drop. He understood now in a way he hadn't understood this morning. The return trip took 4 hours and 50 minutes. Soja sat at the monitoring station the entire time. Lee Sora stayed in the main section with Kim Cheol, running a revised resource calculation that nobody asked for but everyone wanted. I sat in the right cockpit seat and watched the instruments and didn't say anything unnecessary. We hit 2 minor thermal events. Both times Minjun called Soja before adjusting course. Both times she cleared the adjustment within 15 seconds. We landed without further structural events. I ran the numbers at the workbench, out loud, AVI, 38. Down from 51. Here's the breakdown, food 8 ration packs. 5 people at 1,400 calories per day, 9 days. Hydroponic module first harvest, 7 days from now. We make it. Barely. Water 80 liters lost from the sealed bay. WR7 reserve, 24 liters. Next altitude run tonight, will recover approximately 44 liters. We are critically low for 18 hours. Filtration membrane lost. Spare, gone. Primary circuit will need replacement in 3 to 6 days. We have nothing to replace it with. Fuel 890 liters recovered at depot. Minus return transit, 620 liters remaining. Better than before we left. Hull Zone C primary fracture, branched, 6.9 centimeters. Secondary join, rebuilt. Structural integrity, adequate. Not good. Adequate. Power, stable. Reserve, 8 units. Crew, intact. A silence. Then Minjun, looking at the table, I want to say something. Everyone looked at him. I built the route. It was correct based on the data I had. The data was incomplete. He looked at me. Next time I bring a route, I'm going to say what I don't know as well as what I do. And I'm going to ask Soja to check it before we discuss it as a group. Soja, yes. Kim Cheol, that's the protocol change I was going to propose anyway. Lee Sora said nothing. She wrote something in her notebook. I looked at the AVI, 38. 13 points below where we'd been this morning. 13 points that would have to be rebuilt. Again. That night, after the altitude water run, I sat alone in the cockpit. Arcor, recommend reviewing entry 7 again. I already read it. Arcor, there is an entry 8. Previous operator wrote it the day after the incident described in entry 7. I pulled it up. Day 35. We rebuilt. Took 8 days. We were stronger after than before, because the rebuild fixed things we hadn't known were wrong. The failure was expensive. The failure was also the inspection we hadn't done. I don't recommend it as a method. But if it happens, rebuild completely. Not back to where you were. Past it. I sat with that for a while. Outside the viewport, the lava was still moving. Slow, permanent, completely indifferent. Our core, note, passive communication array has logged increased activity on the military encryption signal, bearing north-northwest. Signal strength has increased 14% over the past 48 hours. Sources either moving closer or increasing transmission power. The beacon. Getting stronger. And in the sleeping section, Lee Sora's notebook was sitting on her bunk, closed, with one page folded over. I'd seen it when I walked past. I hadn't touched it. But from the angle I'd been standing, I'd seen 3 words written at the top of the folded page. 8 days. That's how long it took to get back to AVI 51. I know because I counted every single point. 38 to 39 took 6 hours. Lee Sora recalibrated the left filtration circuit using a bypass method she'd seen in a military atmospheric maintenance manual she'd memorized 3 years before the collapse. 1.2. Then the hydroponic module hit its adjusted harvest cycle, 7 days post-failure, 3 days early because Minjun had been monitoring the light cycle obsessively and found a way to extend the photo period by 40 minutes without exceeding the power budget. 2.1. The membrane was the hard part. We had nothing to replace it with. So Jia spent 14 hours in the technical corridor with the drone, cleaning the existing membrane with a solvent she'd distilled from emergency medical alcohol, not a replacement, not even close to a proper solution, but it bought us 12 days of reduced efficiency filtration instead of 3 days of failure. The CO2 crept up slightly. Lee Sora adjusted the sleeping rotation so no one was in the highest concentration zone for more than 4 hours at a stretch. It wasn't comfortable. It was functional. Out here, functional was enough. Our core, AVI 3851. Note, rebuild has corrected several pre-existing inefficiencies not addressed in original construction. Net system resilience, higher than pre-incident baseline. The previous operator had written, the rebuild fixed things we hadn't known were wrong. He was right. The crew settled differently after the depot run. Not better, exactly. More accurately. Like a machine that had been running slightly misaligned and then something shook it hard enough that the parts found their actual positions. Minjun stopped presenting routes as finished products. He started presenting them as drafts. Here's what I know, here's what I don't, here's where So Jia needs to fill the gaps. He was still fast, still technically precise, still the best pilot we had by a margin that wasn't close. But there was a quality to his confidence now that hadn't been there before. It knew its own edges. Kim Cheol's protocol documents were still on the wall. He'd added one clause after the depot run, handwritten at the bottom: routes crossing unknown thermal zones require structural engineer sign-off before group discussion. He didn't ask me to approve it. He put it up and waited to see if I'd take it down. I didn't. Lee Sora had reorganized the medical kit, the sleeping rotation, and the meal schedule without announcing any of it. She'd also started spending 40 minutes each evening sitting with each crew member individually, not formal sessions, just proximity, conversation, whatever the person needed. With Minjun she talked about navigation. With Kim Cheol she talked about nothing in particular, which was apparently what he needed. With So Jia she didn't talk at all. They just sat in the technical corridor and So Jia worked and Lee Sora read, and that was apparently sufficient. With me, she said, on day 5 of the rebuild, you're sleeping 4 hours a night. There's a lot to monitor. Yes. And the person monitoring it needs to be functional. She looked at me with the particular steadiness she used when she was delivering information rather than opinions. You made a good call at the depot. Sealing the bay was correct. The prep decisions that led to needing to make that call, that's what you should be reviewing. Not the call itself. I've reviewed it. Have you, or have you been repeating it? I didn't answer. 6 hours minimum, she said. The system can monitor itself for 6 hours. That's what ArcCore is for. ArcCore, Dr. Lee's assessment is accurate. I can manage overnight monitoring. Are you agreeing with her? Arcor, I am providing factual confirmation of my monitoring capabilities. That's the same thing. Arcor, yes. So Jia came to me on day 6. She'd been working on the Zone C fracture for 4 days, not repairing it, which wasn't possible without a proper machine shop, but mapping it. Every morning she ran a tactile inspection with a probe tool that could measure crack propagation to 0.1 millimeters. She kept a log. She updated it every 6 hours. She came to the cockpit on day 6 with the log. The branching has stopped, she said. The primary fracture propagated 0.4 centimeters in the first 72 hours post-incident. It's been stable for the last 48. The load redistribution from the rebuilt secondary joint is actually reducing stress concentration at the branch point. So it's not getting worse. It's not getting worse. That's different from saying it's fine. She set the log on the console. The failure threshold is now 14 centimeters rather than 12. The branch geometry distributes stress differently. We have more margin than I thought. But the margin is consumed by high-stress events, lateral turbulence, hard maneuvers, thermal shock to the hull plating. Which means we can fly. We can't fight. She looked at me. If something comes at us and we have to maneuver hard to avoid it, we could lose the gear housing. I want you to know that before whatever is north-northwest of us decides to do something. I looked at her. You know about the beacon. Arcor told me when I asked. She said it without apology. I'm the engineer. I need to know what operational threats exist. What did you make of it? She was quiet for a moment. Military encryption, pre-collapse protocol, bearing consistent with a large northern installation. A pause. And the fact that its signal strength has been increasing for the last 10 days. Getting closer or broadcasting louder? Or both? She looked at the console. Tae-yoon. I need to tell you something about the previous operator's notebook. You told me you found it day 1. I told you I found it day 1. I didn't tell you everything that was in it. She pulled the notebook from her pocket. Set it next to the log. There's a section in the middle. Not maintenance records, not personal entries. Technical specifications. Partial schematics for a system I helped design. I looked at the notebook. The WR7? I said. No. She was quiet for a moment. A larger system. The kind of system you build when you're not planning to come back down. She looked at me steadily. He called it Arc Prime. It's not a module. It's not an upgrade. It's a second aircraft. Larger. Built from the beginning as a closed-system biosphere. The design uses this airframe as a reference model. It was clearly built as a proof of concept. I said nothing. The Arc Prime specifications are incomplete in the notebook. Pages missing, physically torn out. But the technical signature of the design is mine. I built the thermal architecture for it. I didn't know what it was for. I was told it was a high-altitude research platform. She looked at her hands. I started wondering when the collapse happened faster than any geological model predicted. I started wondering more when Lee Sora got on board. Why Lee Sora? Because I recognized her name from the project contractor list. She picked up the notebook. She wasn't a medical contractor. She was listed under Environmental Systems, Life Support, Closed Cycle Biosphere. The kind of work you do when you're building something people are going to live in for a very long time. I looked at the bulkhead in the direction of the sleeping section where Lee Sora was currently running her evening conversation rotation with Kim Cheol. She knows what Arc Prime is. She knows more than that, so Ja said. She knows where it is. I didn't go to Lee Sora that night. I thought about it for 4 hours while the altitude water run was processing, 46 liters, slightly above average. The atmospheric moisture content had been higher since a large new lava field had opened to the southeast and the convective activity was increasing. I logged the yield and thought about Lee Sora and thought about the beacon and thought about 3 words on a folded page. Project. North. Arc. The drone came back from its nightly reconnaissance loop at 0240. I reviewed the footage automatically, same routine I'd run every night for 2 weeks. Quadrant South, clear. Quadrant East, minor thermal activity, no signatures. Quadrant West, ash column still active, nothing behind it. Quadrant North-Northwest, I almost marked it clear before I caught it. A heat signature. Larger than anything the drone had picked up before outside of the lava fields themselves. Stationary. At the extreme edge of the drone's sensor range, which meant it was approximately 80 to 90 kilometers away. Not a vehicle. The signature was too spread out for a vehicle. Too organized for a natural thermal feature. A platform. ArcCore, MX4 thermal data, quadrant north-northwest, large area heat signature consistent with powered multi-unit aerial platform. Estimated size, substantial. Confidence, moderate at sensor range limit. Signature has been present in drone sweep data for 6 days. Previously below threshold for automatic flagging. 6 days. It had been there for 6 days and the system hadn't flagged it because it was at the edge of range and below the automatic detection threshold. I pulled up the passive communication array. The military encryption signal, bearing north-northwest, signal strength 34% higher than baseline. Same bearing. Same direction. The platform and the beacon were the same thing. And it was 80 to 90 kilometers away and had been stationary for at least 6 days. Watching us. I woke Sojia first. Then, after we'd looked at the data together for 20 minutes, I woke everyone. It was 0310. Nobody complained about the hour. They looked at the drone footage and the signal data and nobody said anything for a moment. Then Kim Cheol, how long have they been there? At this location, at least 6 days. The signal has been active longer, possibly the entire time since we restarted the power unit. So they tracked us from the restart. Probably. And they haven't approached. No. He looked at the drone footage. That's not a scavenger group. The signature is too large, too organized. He leaned forward. I've seen this kind of platform before. Multi-unit configuration, sustained power at altitude, that's a serious operation. 100 people minimum. Possibly much more. Lee Sara, how long until they decide watching isn't enough? A silence. I looked at the AVI, 51. The hull, adequate. The crew, 5. The weapons, 0. Kim Cheol, we need to know what we're dealing with before they make a move. Not after. Agreed, I said. But the drone's sensor range is the limit. We can't get closer without revealing that we know they're there. Minjun had been looking at the signal bearing data on his navigation overlay. He looked up. I can get us close without them seeing us. The ash column to the northwest runs north-northeast for 40 kilometers. If we approach from inside it, using the column as thermal masking, we can get within 30 kilometers of that platform. At 30 kilometers the drone can get us a visual identification. Sojia, hull stress on a 40-kilometer ash column transit? Minimal. Low speed, stable air inside the column. No thermal differentials above 20 degrees. He looked at her. I checked before I said it. She looked at him for a moment. Yes. That route works. Kim Cheol, when? I looked at the fuel, 620 liters. The food, hydroponic module running, 6 days until next harvest, 8 ration packs as buffer. The membrane, 11 days of reduced efficiency before critical failure. The hull, stable. Tonight, I said. Day cycle we finish the rebuild items. Tonight we go look. ArcCore, OVI update, 5162. New capability unlocked, external sensor array extended range. Activation cost, 25 power units per day. 25 units. That was 25% of the reserve I'd been protecting since day one. I looked at the number. Then I activated it. The schematic expanded. The sensor range doubled. The north-northwest platform resolved from a fuzzy thermal mass into something with actual structure, multiple connected units, clustered, with a distinctive thermal signature in the center that read as a large power source. And at the edge of the new sensor range, in 4 different directions, for smaller signatures. Mobile. Circling. Patrol craft. Arcor, for patrol signatures detected. Circling pattern consistent with perimeter security. Radius, approximately 15 kilometers from platform center. Pattern has been maintained for estimated 48 plus hours. 15 kilometer perimeter. 4 patrol craft. And we were 80 kilometers away, which meant we were outside the patrol radius. For now. Kim Cheol looked at the display. They're not just watching. They're holding a defensible perimeter. He looked at me. Taeyun, whoever this is, they're organized at a level that suggests a command structure, logistics, resources, and enough confidence to run standing patrols over what they consider their territory. We're not in their territory. Not yet. He paused. But we're the only other organized operation within their sensor range. That makes us either a resource or a threat. They'll decide which. Lee Sora, or they've already decided. Everyone looked at her. She was looking at the platform signature on the display. Not at us. Lee Sora, I said. She was quiet for a moment. I've been trying to figure out the right time to tell you, she said. There isn't one. There's only before it becomes urgent or after. She looked at me. That platform is called Prometheus. I know because I know the man who built it. A pause. Commander Park Seon-ho. Former military strategic operations. He was the project director for the environmental systems contract I worked on. Arc Prime, So-ja said quietly. Lee Sora looked at So-ja. Something passed between them, recognition, or the end of pretending not to have recognized each other. Yes, Lee Sora said. Arc Prime. Park Seon-ho knew the collapse was coming. He had access to the modeling data 6 months before it happened. He used that time to build Prometheus. She looked at the platform signature. He also knows that the proof-of-concept airframe, this aircraft, survived. Because he designed the system that's running it. The cockpit was very quiet. He designed Arcor? I said. He commissioned it. The previous operator was his test pilot. She looked at me steadily. The operator designation, the AVI system, the module unlock sequence, all of it was designed to develop the airframe into a sustainable platform in exactly the way you've been developing it. You've been following a protocol, Taeyun. You just didn't know it was a protocol. Arcor, I can confirm the commissioning history of this system. Full disclosure was restricted pending operator readiness threshold. What threshold? Arcor, AVI 60. You reached that threshold 4 hours ago. I looked at the screen. AVI 62. What were you restricted from telling me? Arcor, Prometheus is aware of your location and your AVI status. Commander Park has been monitoring your development. The patrol perimeter was established 6 days ago when your AVI crossed 50. When we became worth watching carefully. Minjun, quietly, so the whole time we've been building this, he's been watching us build it. Arcor, yes. And what does he want? Kim Cheol said. Arcor, the same thing he has always wanted. The Arc Prime system requires this airframe's AVI data, system architecture, and operator control access to complete its final integration. Commander Park cannot finish what he built without what you have built. Kim Cheol looked at me. He doesn't want to take the aircraft. No, Lee Sora said. He wants the operator. The ash column approach happened at 0200 the following night. Minjun flew it without instruments for the last 15 kilometers, full electromagnetic silence, no active sensors, navigating by the drone's passive thermal feed alone inside a column of ash that reduced visibility to 12 meters. He held course to within 200 meters of his projected centerline for the entire transit. At 28 kilometers from the platform, the drone cleared the column's edge and got a visual feed. Prometheus. 3 large cargo airframes locked together in a triangular configuration, connected by enclosed bridge structures. Beneath them, suspended on cable arrays, 6 modular living and production units. Above them, a communications mast and what looked like 2 rotating sensor arrays. Along the outer edges of each airframe, weapons hardpoints. I counted 8 before I stopped counting. 200 people. Maybe more. Running lights, thermal activity, organized movement patterns visible even at this range. And in the center of the configuration, clearly the newest addition, clearly still being assembled, the partial skeleton of something much larger than any of the component airframes. Arc Prime. It was maybe 60% complete. Arc Core, Arc Prime construction, estimated 60 to 65% complete. Components requiring integration for final phase, advanced closed-cycle biosphere module, status, not located. Enhanced atmospheric processing array, status, not located. Operator-level AVI architecture, status, present on this aircraft. The components it was missing. I looked at the drone feed for a long time. Then Minjun, barely above a whisper, Taeyun. Look at the southwest hardpoint on the rightmost airframe. I looked. The hardpoint had a weapon system mounted. Not defensive, the orientation was wrong for perimeter defense. It was pointed inward. At the construction site. At Arc Prime. Kim Cheol, insurance policy. He can destroy it if someone tries to take it. Or if someone tries to take it incomplete and use it without him. I pulled the drone back into the ash column. We transited home in silence. Nobody slept. We sat in the main section at 0500 with the full sensor display running and ate the morning ration allocation, and nobody said anything for a while. Then Kim Cheol, options. 3, I said. We approach and negotiate. We run to change location, go dark, break his tracking. Or we wait and let him make the first move. Negotiating from AVI 62 against AVI unknown and 8 weapons hardpoints is not a negotiation, Kim Cheol said. It's a surrender with extra steps. Minjun, running is smart if we had somewhere to go. Do we have somewhere to go? Lee Sara, there is somewhere to go. She said it quietly, looking at the workbench. The northern installation. The one the previous operator sent his report to. It's real. I've seen the schematics. She looked up. It was built as an independent verification site for the project data. It has its own power, its own water, its own food systems. It was designed to exist without Prometheus. A pause. Park Seon-ho doesn't know its exact location. I do. The beacon. North-northwest. Getting louder. That's where the signal is coming from, I said. Yes. They've been broadcasting since the collapse. Waiting for someone with the right system to hear it. She looked at me. Our core can decrypt the signal. But only with an operator at AVI 60 or above. Our core, confirmed. Decryption capability unlocked at AVI threshold. Awaiting operator authorization. The table was very quiet. I thought about the platform with 8 weapons hardpoints and a partially built Arc Prime with an insurance policy pointed at its own heart. I thought about the previous operator who'd sent a report north-northwest and then died in this cockpit before he got an answer. I thought about 62 points of a functional system, water, food, air, power, crew built from a dead machine with 6 hours of air, 1 drone, and no plan. Authorize decryption, I said. Our core, decrypting. Signal source, 340 kilometers north-northwest. Content, coordinates, access codes, and 1 attached message. Message text, if you're reading this, the operator survived and the Ark is functional. The installation is ready. Come north. Do not come alone. Do not let Park Seon-ho follow you. The data on what happened is here. All of it. Message signature, Dr. Yoon Hana. Date, 14 days post-collapse. She's been waiting 47 days. I ran the numbers one final time. Out loud. For all of them. AVI, 62. Here's what that means right now: air, stable. Membrane at 65% efficiency, 10 days before critical. No replacement in stores. Water, sustainable. 52 liters per day. Adequate for 5. Food, hydroponic producing. 8 ration packs in reserve. 6 days to next harvest. Functional. Fuel, 590 liters. 340 kilometers north-northwest. Round trip, not possible on current reserves. One way, 480 liters. Arrival reserve, 110 liters. Hull, Zone C stable. No high-stress maneuvers. Crew, 5. Intact. Prometheus, 80 kilometers. 4 patrol craft. 8 weapons hardpoints. Commander who designed our system and wants our operator access. Currently watching. Northern installation, 340 kilometers. Coordinates confirmed. Signal active. 1 person waiting. Everything we need to understand what happened. Drone 1. Battery 97%. Reserve power 8 units minus the 25 for the extended sensor array. Running at -17 units. I need to fix that tonight. A silence. Then Minjun, 340 kilometers. One-way fuel. No confirmed refueling at the destination. The installation has its own power systems, Lee Sara said. If it has power, it has fuel or fuel equivalent. The schematics showed an independent energy platform. If, Minjun said. Yes. If. Kim Cheol, we go and we don't have enough fuel to come back if it's wrong. We stay and Prometheus decides we've been stationary long enough. So Ja had been quiet for a long time. She looked at the hull schematic, the Zone C fracture, the rebuilt secondary join, the network of amber and the remaining red. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at me. The aircraft is functional, she said. Not perfect. Not safe by any standard that existed before the collapse. But it works and it will keep working if we don't break it. A pause. 340 kilometers in stable air at 3,000 meters. Hull stress, low. Fuel, tight but viable if the routing avoids thermal zones. She looked at Minjun. I'll need to approve every waypoint. Already assumed, Minjun said. So Jia nodded. Then went back to the technical corridor. That was, I had learned, how she said yes. ArcCore, route calculation to northern installation, initiating. Estimated transit time at fuel optimal speed, 4 hours, 20 minutes. Recommended departure window, 0200 tomorrow, lowest Prometheus patrol overlap probability. Lee Sara was already moving, going to the sleeping section, pulling things out, beginning to prepare. Kim Cheol, I'll run a pre-flight structural check. 3 hours. Minjun was already at the navigation console. I stayed at the workbench for a moment. The drone sat in its cradle, status light blinking green. Long night, I told it. It beeped once. Outside, the lava was still moving. 80 kilometers north-northwest, 8 weapons hardpoints were pointed at a half-built future. 340 kilometers north-northwest, 1 person was waiting with data that explained everything. Avi, 62. Membrane, 10 days. Fuel, one-way tight. Hull, adequate. Crew, ready. Prometheus, 80 kilometers and patient. The installation, 340 kilometers and waiting 47 days. Departure, 0200. Next problem, everything between here and there. Part 7, the fight with Prometheus. We lifted at 0157. 3 minutes early because Kim Cheol finished the structural preflight at 0140 and so Jia said the thermal window at 0200 had a 12-minute variance and 0157 was inside it and waiting wasn't going to make the hull stronger or Prometheus less awake. Minjun took us up to 3,000 meters without a word. No unnecessary inputs, no confidence displays. He flew the way he'd flown since the depot run, like the aircraft was something he was responsible for, not something he was performing with. ArcCore, departure confirmed. Bearing, north-northwest, 337 degrees. Distance to installation, 340 kilometers. Estimated transit, 4 hours, 22 minutes at fuel optimal speed. Current fuel, 590 liters. Arrival reserve at destination, projected 108 liters. Prometheus patrol pattern, current gap, 23 minutes before Northwest patrol craft completes sweep of our departure sector. 23 minutes. We needed to be 40 kilometers out before that patrol craft swept back. Min-Jun. I need 40 kilometers in 22 minutes. That's above fuel optimal speed. I know. A pause of exactly 2 seconds. It costs us 18 liters extra. Do it. The engines increased. The hull vibrated at the new frequency. I was listening for Zone C the way you listen for a sound in a building that might be structural or might be nothing. So Jia was in the technical corridor. I didn't ask her anything. If she heard something wrong, she'd say so. She said nothing. At the 22-minute mark, 43 kilometers from departure point. ARC-Core, Northwest Patrol Craft, completing sector sweep. Current position of ARC, outside sweep radius. Probability of detection, low. Low. Not zero. I watched the patrol signature on the extended sensor display for another 4 minutes until it moved away north, back toward the Prometheus perimeter. Then I let out a breath. Fuel optimal speed, I said. Min-Jun pulled back the engines. For the first 180 kilometers, nothing happened. That sounds like a good thing. Out here, nothing happening for 180 kilometers meant no lateral thermal events, no convective cells rising from new lava fractures, no patrol craft breaking pattern to investigate an anomalous sensor reading. The ash column we were using as partial masking ran 60 kilometers north before dissipating, and Min-Jun threaded us through its centerline with the kind of precision that it stopped being impressive and started being simply reliable. So Jia ran her 0400 thermal assembly check and reported, nominal. Zone C fracture, unchanged at 6.9 centimeters. Secondary join, holding. Lee Sora distributed ration packs, half allocation, morning cycle. She'd adjusted the schedule to reduce consumption during transit. Nobody argued. Kim Cheol sat in the jump seat behind Min-Jun and watched the sensor display without speaking. He'd been watching it for 2 hours when he said, quietly, the Eastern Patrol has broken pattern. I looked at the display. He was right. The Eastern Prometheus patrol craft, which had been running a consistent 15-kilometer perimeter arc for the entire 6 days we'd been watching, had changed heading. It was now moving northeast. Away from the perimeter. On a bearing that, extended 200 kilometers, would intersect our route in approximately 80 minutes. Coincidence? Min-Jun said. No, Kim Cheol said. They tracked our departure. Either the sensor array picked up our thermal signature during liftoff or one of the patrol craft caught our exhaust trace on the eastern edge of the ash column. ARC-Core, Eastern Prometheus patrol craft, speed increasing. Current heading projects to route intersection in 74 minutes at current relative velocities. Craft classification, medium interceptor. Likely armament, 2 hardpoint weapon systems. Medium interceptor. 2 weapons. We had 1 drone at 97% battery, hull-mounted thermal panels that could spike our external temperature profile, and an ash column that was 180 kilometers behind us. Options, I said. 3, Min-Jun said immediately. He'd been thinking about this since Kim Cheol spoke. Climb to 6,000 meters, we get above their optimal intercept envelope, but hull stress increases and fuel consumption goes up 22%. Run due east for 40 kilometers to open the intersection angle, costs us time and fuel and doesn't solve the problem. Or we continue on course and deal with them when they get here. Continuing on course means they intercept us with 160 kilometers still to run. Yes. So Jia, from the technical corridor, no climbing. Not at 6,000 meters with Zone C in current condition. That eliminated option 1. How much fuel does the eastern deviation cost? I asked. Min-Jun, running east for 40 kilometers then correcting back to bearing, approximately 65 liters. Plus the time lost, they'll have closed more distance during the deviation. Net effect, we arrive at the intersection point with the gap changed by maybe 8 kilometers. Not enough. Not enough. Then we continue, I said. And we need a plan for when they arrive. I thought about it for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 because I watched the Eastern Patrol craft's range decrease from 94 kilometers to 83 kilometers while I worked through it. The problem was simple and ugly: we couldn't outrun an interceptor, we couldn't outclimb it safely, we couldn't outfight it, and there was no ash column, no terrain feature, no atmospheric structure between us and the installation that I could see on the sensor display. What I could see, at bearing 015 degrees, 22 kilometers east of our route, there was a thermal feature that the extended sensor array was reading as a sustained updraft cluster, a series of convective columns rising from a new lava field that had opened in the last week. The columns were tight together, running approximately 30 kilometers north-south. Temperature differential from ambient, 90 to 140 degrees depending on column proximity. Too hot for us. Our hull could handle 20-degree differentials without stress. But the interceptor was a military craft. Military interceptors were built for combat environments, not survival ones. Their hull ratings were for weapons impacts and pressure variance, not prolonged thermal exposure. A military interceptor that spent 6 minutes threading through 140-degree convective columns would have cooling system problems. We had a rebuilt, carefully monitored, properly oriented thermal assembly. They had standard military cooling, designed for altitude in combat, not lava world atmospheric hell. It wasn't a weapon. It was a maze. Minjun, I said. The thermal cluster at bearing 015, 22 kilometers east. He looked at the sensor data. A pause. You want to run through it? I want them to follow us through it. Another pause. Longer. If we enter those columns, we're looking at hull surface temperatures of 60 to 80 degrees in the cooler margins. Zone C. So Jia. I raised my voice slightly toward the corridor. Hull surface temperature of 60 to 80 degrees for 8 minutes. Zone C fracture. A silence. I could hear her running calculations, not on a device, in her head. That was how she worked. Fracture propagation under that thermal load, 0.3 to 0.5 centimeters. Branch point, stable, the temperature is even, not differential. That's the key. Differential thermal shock is what propagates cracks. Even heat load is survivable. So we can do it. I said survivable. I didn't say comfortable. A pause. Stay in the outer margin of the columns. Don't go near the core. And Taeyun, if the interceptor follows us in and we have to maneuver to avoid a collision inside those columns, hard maneuvers plus thermal load could push Zone C past threshold. What's the probability they follow us in? Kim Cheol answered before So Jia could. High. Military interceptor pilots are trained to maintain pursuit through adverse conditions. Breaking off looks like a failure. Their commander is watching. He looked at the sensor display. Park Seonho is watching. So they follow us in, I said. Yes. And their cooling system is not built for this. I looked at the route. The thermal cluster was 22 kilometers east, a 7-minute deviation from course at current speed. Threading through it north-south would take approximately 9 minutes at reduced speed. Then correcting back to bearing, 340 kilometers minus approximately 35 kilometers of progress during the deviation. Still achievable on current fuel if we didn't lose anything significant to the detour. Minjun. New heading, 015 degrees. Take us to the eastern margin of the thermal cluster. Understood. He adjusted course without hesitation. So Jia, I'll call column proximity at every kilometer. Confirmed, she said. The drone I sent ahead on the new bearing, not for reconnaissance this time, but for one specific purpose I hadn't explained to anyone yet. The interceptor saw our course change. Of course it did. It was 71 kilometers away with a full military sensor suite. The course change would have read as anomalous behavior, a civilian profile aircraft making a deliberate eastward deviation away from any known destination. ARCOR, Eastern Prometheus Intercept Craft, course adjusted to maintain intercept solution. Speed increased. Estimated intercept, 58 minutes. They were coming faster now. Good.